Well, thank you, Michelle, and thanks, Alex, for a great presentation. We'll shift gears here to talk about weather, and I'm going to start with probably the obvious well, at least for some of you, but that's the severe weather outbreak here earlier this week on Tuesday. And there's several little images on here, but the map is essentially what we have right now. There's still numbers coming in with this, but an unusually strong severe weather outbreak, more than 40 tornadoes reported across the U.S. That basically was well, we're now at 14 days actually in a row of having tornadoes in the U.S. And this is associated, if you wonder about this is associated with a very unusual jet stream pattern with highly amplified big ridges and troughs across the U.S. and it is linked with this and an incredibly active storm track through the middle of the country. And again, on Tuesday, all the ingredients came together in this case in a negative way, a bad way, to lead to some very strong severe thunderstorms, supercells they're called in the discipline, and a number of tornadoes, and some of them were very destructive, lots of property damage, power outages, you name it. I think one of the miracles is so far, at least, no reported fatalities, and that in itself, I think, is fairly miraculous given the violence and given the how strong these tornadoes were. But one thing to remember too, a couple things. One is that we in Michigan we do see severe weather, but frequently not like that. It looked like you looked at the radars and you looked at the damage. This is something that you see in the southern Great Plains, and we had that basically located in the Great Lakes region. The other thing is that given that we don't see it very often, it's a reminder that it can happen, and it has happened before. And so, yes, we're somewhat fortunate. We're not in the heart of Tornado Alley, but we still, on occasion, do see these severe events. From the map, though, you can see once again geographically, mostly this was impacting the southern part, especially southwestern lower Michigan, where several tornadoes were reported. But there was also some very large hail. You can see an image of that in the lower left. One report I saw 4-inch hail, which is very rare here in Michigan. And some high winds, but the big impact was from tornadoes. But Michigan was right on the northeastern edge, and I guess it could have been worse. Those storms gradually weakened as they moved to the east. So the area that had the damage was at least limited more than what it could have been. So again, something unusual, but a reminder that once in a while we do see weather like this. The statistics and the strength, and the National Weather Service has survey teams out now still trying to catch up with all of the activity and find out, but we'll have numbers here shortly to know how strong some of these storms actually were. For the past week, though, itself, we look at the normals on the left-hand side, our mean temperatures. It was another warmer than normal week, statewide and region-wide, with our mean temperatures for the week ranging from 2 or 3 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the far northwest to as much as 8 in the south. And so that's a pattern we've seen for much of the spring thus far. And depending on where you were, precipitation totals range from some cases, less than half an inch. That was true across much of central, especially east central lower Michigan here on the right in the blue. You can see that, to many areas picking up once again more than an inch and a half. The yellow is the threshold for 2 inches, and much of that is the precip we saw during the severe weather. You can actually see two particular streaks here that were associated with some of the most severe weather. One that went through the Chicago area earlier in the afternoon, crossed the lake, and then moved into northern Berrien and Van Buren. The other streak is the cell that spawned the Branch County tornadoes, Union City, and you can see that a little bit further to the south. But once again, most of that rainfall fell on Tuesday early evening with that severe weather. So western parts of the state definitely had significantly greater rainfall for the week than the east, and of course at this time of the year, that's a continuing challenge. Trying to wait and get things done, but we've done better generally in the eastern side than we have in the west. Soil temperatures, and this is something thinking back about Alex's results and comments. Our soil temperatures are still, with the warmer than normal air temperatures, are still elevated. On the upper right hand side here, these are 2-inch bare soil temperatures from our EnviroWeather site at East Lansing, so sort of in the middle of the state. But you can see with the red, that's the air temperature. The greens are the 2-inch soil temperatures. And so mostly here, we're running generally in the upper 50s to around 60 during the day. And then the lower left hand, if we look at this across the state or more regionally, soil temperatures at 2 inches under bare soil range generally from the upper 40s in the far north and northeastern parts of the state to the low 60s in the far south. So that gives you some kind of a range. We've been there for about a week. Given the forecast and with some cooler weather moving in today and over the next couple days, we'll probably see a couple degrees drop off though here before we talk next week. Degree day totals for the season beginning in March, and again thinking now primarily about our overwintering crops like wheat. Where are we? Well, still about the same. The base 50 units range from about 100 in the far northern parts of the state, where we're still just getting really in gear here for the season with the warm up, to more than 300 across the southwestern lower. And in terms of calendar time, still significantly ahead of normal in all but western upper Michigan. And areas in the south were generally at least 1 calendar week, some cases probably pushing 2 calendar weeks ahead of normal in terms of heat accumulation for the early part of May. Well, looking at the forecast, I talked about an active weather pattern, and that in general is the direction and the theme for the next several days. A number of weather disturbances going through, but with some, I also have to say that many of these will have limited moisture. And so, yes, we will have many chances for precipitation, but not as much water as what we have seen in the last couple of weeks. Today, our first weather system of interest is down over the Ohio Valley, and that's going to move, and instead of moving to our west, like many of the systems have during the last several weeks, including the last one with the severe weather, this one's going to move to our south, and the weather with it will be more like what we typically see in the cold season. If it were a couple months ago, we might even see frozen precip or snow with this, but this one will be primarily a light rain event, and it will be primarily really limited to the southern third of the lower peninsula. And really looking at this forecast over time, the amount of rain, the amount of water, the amount of precipitation expected has gone down. And what we initially thought was going to be a widespread 1/4 to 1/2 inch, I think is going to be in most cases less than a 1/4 of an inch. And really, again, confined to areas generally south of I-96 and especially I-94. From the radar in here, this is a recent radar shot here down in the lower left. You can see the precipitation with this. And there's a note that there's a very sharp, really drop off as we go from south to north. So areas just to the north of this will remain dry, and then you'll get some light rain or sprinkles. But the heaviest rain will be down along the Ohio and Indiana borders during the day today. That will continue through most of the day and into this evening, and then clearing is expected for tomorrow, but cool. So one other change that you'll notice here today, highs only in the upper 50s to low 60s in most areas, and that's going to be the case the next couple of days. So actually a little bit cooler than normal for a change of pace. Now, one thing to note, high pressure moving in here overnight, we will see some fairly chilly temperatures in the northern part of the state. And we could see some frost and or freezing temperatures there, especially interior areas of upper Michigan and maybe parts of interior northern lower. Everybody else south of that will probably remain in the low 40s or so, but it will be a pretty cool night. And this will be the coolest morning tomorrow that we'll be looking at. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of 30 or 31 lows up in the far northern part of the state. Next weather system, number 2, is going to be approaching from our north and west here by tomorrow, although tomorrow should be mostly dry, but by late in the day or early afternoon, we should see the chance for some scattered showers once again in the upper peninsula, spreading south and east overnight. And here's the map for Saturday. You can see again more scattered rainfall there in green across much of the lower peninsula. Now, this is not widespread rainfall. This will be scattered, showery type of thing, 30% chance, maybe 40% chance in most areas. So the rainfall totals with this will generally be a 1/4 of an inch or less where rain occurs. There will be some areas that probably remain dry. The threat of this with this weather system continues on for much of the day Saturday into early Sunday, and then a third weather system beyond that. Remember, I mentioned active. Well, this is the definition of it. by the early part of next week, probably on Monday. And then there's another system beyond that. So this and hopefully not linking too much with Alex's theme here with flooding, but we will have number of precipitation chances. It's just that the amounts and the totals with this will be somewhat limited. So if we look in the gauge here by next Thursday, here's the at least right now the potential, the totals. You can see a major change or major difference. The highest totals expected in the south, where some areas picking up a quarter, maybe 3/4 of an inch. That's the heaviest though, and it gets a lot less than that as you go north. And so area and this is probably a good thing, because some of the heaviest precipitation we've had during the last few weeks has been in the northern part of the state, and this hopefully will give maybe some opportunities for the soils to dry out a bit and at least start to think about field work or get more involved with field work. Our potential evapotranspiration rates, which is another piece of this, how much atmospheric demand do we expect? Probably a little bit above normal for the upcoming week, but generally daily rates on the order of about 14 to 18 hundredths of an inch per day. That's what the atmosphere would demand if the water were there on the surface, and in some cases it will be. So we should see fairly good drying going on, our rates of drying during the upcoming week, even with the regular chances for precipitation. In the medium range, there has been, in the last week, there's been a lot of back and forth and inconsistency. And when we see that in the forecast guidance, many times, well, certainly the confidence is not there that it is, but it's suggested this cooler than normal little period that we're going through over the next couple of days, but most of it keeps coming back to the warmer than normal, and that's with the upper air pattern that's a troughing out over Western North America, ridging over the east. That means one thing for us, and that is above normal temperatures. So once again, both the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14 day outlooks are in upper right hand for the temperature, suggesting warmer than normal temperatures, and I think that's a really good bet. We will see I mentioned our high temperatures only in the upper 50s to low and mid-60s here in the last few days. We'll be back into the 70s for most areas of the state here by the early part of next week, and then probably continue there. Lows back up into the upper 40s, into the 50s, so much closer to a more of an early summer type of pattern coming back by next week and above normal means. Also, unfortunately, with an active storm track still expected, lots of chances for precip normal to above normal precipitation totals. And that's true for both 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day time frame. So not much of a change there, unfortunately. And as we've talked about the last few weeks, it's just, if you're lucky enough to be in one of those areas that gets less precip or no precip, and you've got a chance, take advantage of it. It's this is Michigan. It's spring. And it's just one of those that's never been truer than in a season like this. But some areas, unfortunately, that have had the heavier rain recently, they're going to have to wait a little bit longer for things to dry out. So summarizing here again, active pattern continues for much of the next week, but hopefully the precip totals will be less than what we have observed or recorded here over the last few weeks, but still into the latter parts of May, still looking probably at a warmer and wetter than normal pattern. And with that, I will wrap up and introduce next week's speaker. And it's going to be Dr. Erin Burns from MSU, and she's going to be with us to talk about weed control. So that's next Thursday morning at 7. Don't miss that one. And with that, I'm going to move back or hand it back off to Phil here to talk about our UP credits. Thanks.